cow-calf stage of beef production. You are probably born at night and with little difficulty, but if your mother has trouble delivering you, then your first contact outside her womb might be in the arms of a rancher, as she helps deliver you safely with little harm to you or your mother. As the sun rises, you see the world for the first time, and one of these sights is the rancher's truck coming your way. Your mother does not run from the truck, as it is delivering food, so you do not run either. As your mother begins munching on the grain, the rancher quickly catches you, places an ear tag in your ear, coats your navel with iodine, and then releases you. This tag contains a number, which is basically your name, allowing the farmer to record your mother's identity and also track your progress. Before releasing you, some ranchers may place a pellet under the skin in your ear, which slowly releases a synthetic growth hormone that will help you grow fast, reducing costs for the rancher and the amount of resources consumed for each pound of meat you produce. Not all farms use hormones though. It depends on its price and the expected weight gain the rancher believes it provides. For the next month, you will never be touched by a human hand. In fact, except for a few times in the next 6 to 8 months of your life, you will be left alone in a large pasture, living what most people would call a natural life. Natural, except that you have little need to fear predators. Some ranchers may castrate males on the day they are born, cutting a hole in the scrotum sac and pulling the testicles out with their hands. For one semester as an undergraduate, this was my job, and yes, it does take some getting used to. Many farms will wait until you are a month or two old and will place a tight band, think of a very small but strong rubber band, above your scrotum sac and below your belly. Cutting off circulation to your testicles, the band causes the scrotum and its testes to die and fall off the calf. A third method is the brasier, which crushes the cord above the testicles. The longer the rancher waits, the more traumatic and painful the castration may be, and if you are not castrated, you provide inferior meat and are more likely to injure ranchers and other cows. Anesthetic could, but rarely is, used on working farms. Not all breeds of cattle grow horns. The Angus and Polled Hereford breeds, for example, do not. If you are one of the breeds who naturally grow horns, they will probably be removed to prevent you from harming yourself, other cows, or humans. This can be achieved by rubbing a paste on the buds of your horns. The paste probably contains calcium hydroxide and sodium hydroxide, chemicals that work by burning and thus destroying the cells that produce horns. Or you may be dehorned using other methods, like burning the horn buds with a hot iron or an implement that simply scoops the horn and its root out of the head. Though without anesthetic, these procedures can be painful, the pain is temporary and arguably better than having your side pierced by the long horn of one of your peers. Though many farms remove horns without the use of anesthetics in the U.S., doing so is illegal in some nations and is increasingly unpopular. Farmers Weekly has graciously allowed me to show a video using a hot iron and anesthetic to prevent horn growth, demonstrating an effective, safe, and humane way of preventing horn growth.
So I tend to put about 5 mils per side, that way you're sure that you've got a good pain relief block. So when doing calves, I tend to search behind the eye. There's a groove that runs behind up towards the horn. So when going in, you follow this groove approximately an inch behind on the way up to the horn. And I tend to fan the needle about so that you get a good coverage of local in the area where the nerves run behind the eye and under the skin. So make sure you do it on both sides. Okay. It's important that you have enough time between when putting the local anaesthetic in and when you're going to disbud the animal so that it has time to work. Typically 2 to 5 minutes is ideal to get a good block so that the sensation is lost from around the horns. What you start, it's important to check whether the block has taken effect or not. And so what happens is when the nerves have been blocked out, their eyelids get a bit droopier, so they tend to lose feeling on the eyelids. So they start to droop down across the eye, and they become a bit saggy at the top. So it's important when dehorning you make sure that the irons are hot enough so that they do the job quickly, and also they'll sear the skin from stopping any bleeding. So they're nice and pink, nice and hot. So it's important that you restrain the calf properly, get the calf held with the head tilted, all skin out the way that possibly can get in the way and get burnt. Still nice and hot. Find the ridge where the horn or the budding is going to take place, which you can see is a little bit of a ridge there. Then you're going in over the horn, just give it a good twist, make sure you're scouring around, twisting around like that, which is going to pop out the skin, and then you pop it out, and you're left with a nice clean area where the horn has been removed from the underlying tissue. That will leave you with no horn that's going to grow. Okay. So it's nice and cauterized, there's been no pain for the calf because it's been anaesthetized, the local skin, and that's free from infection. We'll also blue spray it now so that there's no infection gets in the wound. So put blue spray over the area, so that's an antibiotic spray. That's it. Yeah.
It will likely be cold the day you were born, perhaps in late February or early March. It may strike you as odd that every other calf is about your age. This is because every mother cow conceived at about the same time because they were brought into estrus simultaneously. Ranchers synchronize estrus by inserting a small device in the cow's vagina, a device referred to as a CIDR, an acronym, which resembles a tampon. The CIDR will remain in the vagina for 7 days. On the 6th day, an injection of prostaglandin is administered, and on the 7th day, the CIDR is removed. The cow will then go into heat, that is, estrus, meaning ready to conceive, 8 to 11 days after the CIDR is inserted, and 1 to 3 days after it is removed. Not all ranchers synchronize estrus. Some may instead observe the cattle and simply breed them when they come into heat. On any given day, there are a number of different ways of detecting which cows are in heat. Most livestock seem to exhibit some degree of homosexuality, and when a cow is in estrus, female cows will often try and mount her as if they're going to breed her, thereby revealing to the rancher the cow is indeed in heat. A similar method is to take a cow not needed for breeding and inject her with testosterone, a male hormone, so that she behaves like a male. This testosterone-pumped female will then try and mount every cow in heat. I once had a job where I rode a horse and penned a herd of cattle in the corner of a pasture every day. And for 15 minutes I watched this hormone-altered female. She tried to mount every other cow in heat. And I would then write down the identification number of the cows being ridden. The next day someone would then artificially inseminate the cows on that list. Other ranchers attach a device to the head of the hormone-altered female with something resembling a ballpoint pen on the bottom. Then, whenever the hormone-injected female mounts another cow, as the bottom of her head rubs against the cow's back, it releases ink. The rancher can then identify cattle in heat according to whether their backs are painted. Not all farms use such advanced technology, though. Some people just release a bull into a herd of cattle and allow them to breed naturally. It may seem odd that you were born at a time when there is little grass to eat, but the reason becomes obvious in a few months. Though you will nurse for perhaps 8 months, you will begin supplementing milk with grass when only a few weeks old. By June and July, you are growing fast, constantly nursing and grazing, and your mother needs as much nourishment as possible to produce your milk. June and July also happens to be the time when the grass, the cheapest feed available to the farmer, is most available. You were born in late winter so that grass is most abundant when it is most needed. To help meet all your nutritional needs, there is always a mineral block, or bowl of ground minerals, in the pasture, something you feel the urge to lick periodically. This helps ensure that you have all your mineral needs met, but it might also contain some antibiotics, which helps you stay healthy and grow fast. Water will always be available in the form of a trough fed by groundwater or a tank, meaning a small pond. When noticing that all other calves are roughly your age, what you do not recognize was that there is a smaller herd of cows you never encountered on the farm. Cows in this herd were born in early fall, and thus needed food the most when it was cold and no grass grew. Around the time you were born, these calves were being weaned, sent to the market for sale. Because there was no grass, the rancher provided these calves forage in the form of hay, so they did have plenty to eat. Feeding hay is more expensive than grazing grass, though, and thus these fall-born calves are more expensive to raise. The higher expense discourages ranchers from calving in the fall, but because there are fewer weaned calves on the market in March, the rancher receives a higher price. Thus, some producers are willing to incur the higher cost of calving in the fall because those calves will receive a higher price in the market. Markets thus coordinate ranchers' calving such that there are weaned calves at almost all times of the year, and thus there is a year-round supply of fresh beef. But you're not in that herd of calves that were born in the fall. So let's get back to your life and the life of other calves your age. Only very rarely are you confined to small spaces. Most of the time you live in a large pasture with other calves and their mothers. You will not be confined to a barn unless you are very sick, and once the grass starts growing, it does so in ample quantities. Life feels natural, like this is the way you were supposed to live. Your mother by your side always, peers to play with, and new pastures to explore. You cannot imagine anything else you could possibly want. By October, you are more mature and independent. Your time on the cow-calf operation is almost complete, but you must be weaned before you are sold to another rancher. Being weaned is stressful. Your mother is taken to the other side of the farm, and as you call and call for her, she does not answer. The anxiety doesn't last long, though. To help you through this stressful time, the rancher may supplement your forage meaning grass and hay, with a grain supplement, and the second you look sick, health care is provided, usually in the form of antibiotics. Some ranchers anticipate health problems at weaning, and in response add low levels of antibiotics to your feed. At birth you weighed about 80 pounds, but now you weigh 500. 2 weeks after being weaned, it is now time for the second stage of your life and the second stage of beef production. Before going to the second stage of your life, let's pause and consider what your life would have been like if you had been born a heifer, which is what females are called before they have their first calf. If the rancher decides to keep a heifer for breeding purposes, the only time she will leave the farm is right at the end of her life. Until then, she stays on the farm and is kept in a pasture with other heifers until about 15 months old, after which she is bred for the first time. The gestation for cows is 9 months, so this will have her calving at about 2 years of age, in late winter. Some ranchers may simply place a bull in a pasture for natural breeding, but others may use artificial insemination. Heifers have more trouble calving due to their smaller bodies, so ranchers may use bull semen from sires known to produce smaller calves. The rancher will also keep a closer eye on heifers than the older cows. After a month passes, a rancher may use ultrasound to detect if she is pregnant, and if not, will either sell her for slaughter or breed her again. After she gives birth, the heifer becomes a cow and will be placed in a herd, and there she will continue to produce cows for 2 to 5 years, or perhaps even up to 10 years, depending on her reproductive performance and ability to produce milk. There will come an age when she is less productive than young heifers, and the farmer will sell her for slaughter. After being sold in an auction, she is transported and held in pens for a few more days, after which her muscle, though too tough for use as steaks, will be processed into a processed meat like ground beef or sausage. Remember, you are not this hypothetical heifer. You are a steer, and it is now time to introduce you to the second stage of your life. If you had been born a heifer that the rancher decided not to retain for breeding, your life would have been basically the same as being born a male. After being taken to an auction and sold to a new owner, you are placed into a group of strangers of roughly the same size and age. For a few days you are held in small pens and then transported to your new home. There you are again held temporarily in pens, and perhaps another synthetic growth hormone will be placed under the skin of your ear. The farmer may replace your old ear tag with a new one and may even brand you using a hot iron or an extremely cold iron, which permanently turns the hair white. Just to be safe, you might be administered some antibiotics in your feed, but only a short time passes until you are once again released into a large pasture. It's not exactly the home you once knew, but very close to it. Now you are a stocker calf, and the first thing you notice is that the grass tastes different. You have tasted wheat for the first time. The farmer grew wheat for two reasons: to feed cattle and to harvest the wheat for sale. However, she can only do both if you and your friends are removed from the wheat pasture before the wheat develops what they call its first hollow stem. This is when an ungrazed wheat plant begins growing a hollow stem just above the level of the plant roots and has reached a level of about 1 inch. If wheat prices are low and the price of cattle is high, the farmer may decide to let you continue grazing wheat after the first hollow stem, foregoing the sale of wheat so that she can sell you at a higher weight. This is your story of the stocker stage of production if you were raised in the south central U.S. In other places you might be fed hay and grain during the winter, or perhaps grazed on winter wheat planted exclusively for grazing, and thus will not be harvested for wheat seed. Some farmers may use fescue or clover, which provide grazing in the fall or spring.
Once the calves reach about 500 pounds on the stocker operation, at which point they'll be about a year old, they'll be sold to a feedlot. And this is a feedlot. And as its name describes, it is a place where there are small lots where the cattle are kept and where they are fed. You can see there's no grass here, so the grazing days are over. And although they are in a rather confined pen, it's not near as confined as hogs and layers are on pork and egg farms. In fact, the cows here get about 10 times more space than hogs do on hog farms. And so that's good for the animal. But that's also a little bit deceiving. You'll notice that the way the feedlot is made, there's kind of a hill in the middle. And then there's a gentle slope to the sides and a gentle slope to the back. That's because when it rains here at the feedlot, they want to have it where there will always be dry spots on the top of the hill. So this means during rainy days, there's going to be water on the sides, water on the sides, water in the back. So during bad weather, some of this will not really be available to them. It won't be good space that they'd want to be in anyway. And feedlots tend to be located in the central U.S., south central U.S., largely because of the climate. It's relatively arid out here. There's some access to feed, and it's generally favorable weather, and cattle are healthier in favorable weather. If they were in a feedlot and say in Montana where it could get very cold, or in Florida where it can be very humid and hot, they're going to get sick more. They're not going to grow as fast. They're not going to be as healthy. And so it's simply more efficient to raise animals where the weather is favorable to their health. And now notice when sometimes people criticize feedlots, they'll say that the animals are standing in their own manure and urine. And to a large degree, that's right. When I bend over here and I pick up what's on the ground, that's not dirt. That's dried manure and dried urine. But when you look at it, it looks kind of like dirt. Well, this is another advantage of having a feedlot in the south central U.S. because it's so dry, they're not knee-deep in muddy manure. It's mostly dry, and it doesn't cling to them that much and doesn't cause that much sickness. You've probably seen on the cow-calf operation, and now you're going to see here, that cows are relatively gentle creatures. They're a little skittish of you. They don't want you to touch them, but they're not terrified of you, and they're certainly not aggressive in any way. We've seen that up to the time the cow comes into the feedlot, they have constant access to pasture or hay, usually lots of room to roam around, but they don't anymore. They don't have grass anymore. They don't have lots of room. It's a rather uninteresting, boring pen. And so there are certainly some disadvantages to being in a feedlot for the cow, but there are some advantages. Although the cow no longer gets that grass that they're used to eating, they get something that they like even more. Cattle love this. They love it more than grass. When the cow first gets here, the feed that they get is going to be mostly hay, which is just dried grass, harvested grass. But then the more time they spend here, the less hay there'll be in here and more grain, things like corn, soybean meal. And those are the foods cattle really love. So if you went to this feedlot and opened up the back gate and gave them access to pasture, they would go out into the pasture. They would eat some of the grass. They would lie in the grass. But when they saw that feed truck roll around, they would come right back in and go to the trough to eat. So there are some disadvantages being in a feedlot, but the advantage is they get a food that they absolutely love and lots of it. When we think of what is a natural food source for cattle, we think of grass or hay, not corn, soybean meal, things like that. But things like corn and soybean meal is mostly what they're going to be eating in a feedlot after they've been here a while. So in one way it's kind of an unnatural diet, and some have said that that can cause health problems, and it could, but it generally doesn't, and here's why. When the cattle first come here, they're used to eating grass, and so the first feed that they get right here is going to be mostly hay. Hay just being dried grass that's been harvested. But the longer they stay here, the lower the content of their feed that'll be in grass and hay, and the higher the content will be of that food will be grain. And so the rancher is going to slowly introduce more and more grain into the diet, and as they do that, the digestive system of the cow becomes accustomed to the grain, and in that way you don't have many health problems. The one health problem you can have is something called bloating, and it can kill cattle, but of course ranchers don't make money if their cattle are dying, so they can monitor bloating very carefully. And when we look at data, we find that only about 2% of the cattle at feedlot ever have any trouble with bloating, and the death rate from bloating is very, very low, well below 1%.
Unlike chickens and hogs, cows rarely fight amongst each other, so injuries are seldom. If anyone in your pen gets hurt, it's most likely due to riding, where steers mount one another as if they are going to breed. This is pointless, as you are a steer and all your pen mates are steers. There are also other pens consisting of heifers who are not reserved for breeding, and so their life is nearly identical to yours. Riding is even a problem with the heifers. However, riding is easy to detect, and cattle identified as frequent riders are removed and kept separate from others. Though you cannot taste it at first, your food at the feedlot will sometimes contain low levels of antibiotics, even when you are not sick. These subtherapeutic antibiotics administered to you reduces sickness, reduces the mortality rate, and helps you grow faster. They can also prevent liver infections, which arises when cattle are eating large amounts of grain and are growing fast. At some point close to slaughter, the antibiotics will be removed from your food to make sure there are no antibiotic residues in the meat that you provide. Months have passed since you arrived at the feedlot. Though you miss pastures, you also do not wish to stray too far from that feeding trough where that scrumptious meal was delivered. At about 16 months of age and around 1,300 pounds, you are sold for slaughter, where your meat is made into the steaks, briskets, ground beef, roast, and the like. Your life, which has been largely pleasant, especially compared with the lives of layers and hogs, will feed 8 Americans for 1 year.